Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Christopher Mulliens. How are you?
Good in yourself.
I am doing well on this Friday afternoon. So it's so good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Really good to see you. And I know you as a veteran, but and I know that you have started your own organization. So tell me more about the Freddie Mae Foundation.
Well, so the Freddie Mae Foundation basically was started in 2017. And the reason I started this was because we wanted to help men who've been abused, battered, addicted to drugs and alcohol, and their children. And I got this idea because when I was on deployment from 2016 to 2017, I realized that I knew the military wasn't going to be my end all to be all. I wasn't going to retire. I knew I wasn't going to do all of that. And I just, asked the Lord, why did he bring me out 4,857 miles in the middle of the desert for what purpose? And he gave me the
Mhm.
vision of starting my own organization. And it's named after my grandmother. My grandmother's name is Freddie Mae Farmer. And
Okay.
so to honor her and her legacy, I named it after her because she represents everything I want the organization to stand for: love, faith, hope, charity, and giving of yourself a selfless service. And if God willing, she'll be 93 next February.
Wow, that is amazing. That's so beautiful that you were able to name an organization after her and she's able to still be here to really see the fruits of her labor.
Yes,
Wow. Wow. And you said her birthday will be February
right.
and she'll be 93.
93.
Nice. That is wonderful. Wonderful. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Congratulations. I mean, it sounds like this came to you during deployment and you're in the middle of, you know, the world and realizing, wow, this is what I need to do. So tell me more about the foundation. What all do you do?
So, well, we have a project we're working on, and I'll get to that in a second. But what we
Okay.
normally do is on the first and third Saturdays, we go out and we provide clothing, toiletry items, shoes, anything that you think a homeless individual may need, we provide it for them. But
Mm-hmm.
we actually been moving towards a mission because what happened was it's been about 2 or 3 years now. We had a client named Mr. Willie Walker. He actually was found frozen to death on a stoop. And so we made it our mission to say, hey, we need to get our homeless men off the street. Nobody should die on the street frozen to death. And people, yes, he was a veteran. I know he may have had other opportunities and this and that, some, other things going on. But I think we realized that Augusta, Georgia has a huge homeless issue, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not just Augusta, it's other cities and states as well. But because this is my community, this is what I'm focused on right now. And I
Yes.
realized that, we had gone through a pandemic of COVID-19 and all of this other stuff, but I realized that we are still going through a pandemic of homelessness. And I feel that we need to really start focusing in on our men and our children, because if we don't, a lot can be alleviated and a lot can be lost. And what I mean by
Yes.
alleviated, if we get our men, working with our children, mentoring, developing our children how we used to, protecting our communities. I believe a lot of this that's going on in our communities, the shootings, the killings, all of this will
Mhm.
eventually eradicate even the illiteracy, getting our men on board, because a lot of this has been thrusted upon the woman and put on the woman's shoulders, that we need to start looking at and say, hey, how can we get this back? How can we get our men back in the community how we should be, making sure that our children are good? And we have a lot of men in the community who are actually, that may be homeless or close to being homeless, that are really, really good fathers, but they have had some issues. And a lot of times people look at that and say, oh, well, you're a man. You can pull yourself up by your own bootstrap and all this other stuff. And I'm like, sometimes
Mhm.
we have not been given the boot nor the strap to actually do that with. So, I try not to use that as like an anecdote or anything to say, hey, this is what we're going to do, because there's a lot of issues with our men. We go through depression, we go through anxiety, we go through,
Mhm.
anger, all these different things. So with that being said, we actually are working on a project now to fund the Mullins house. And basically what the Mullins house is that
Okay.
we're going to have a 3 to 4 bedroom house so that we can start housing our men. And what we want to do is be able to take them through basically classes, help them go through job training, parenting classes, um, counseling, these different things, so that when our men finish our program, they have the tools that they need to be back in society. And we want to be able to make sure that we give them financial literacy and set them up with stable housing so that they don't have a recurrence of going back on the street. And they have the tools and everything that they can have to take care of their family. And lastly, I'm going to say this about the foundation because I know I can speak about this all day. Um,
You're passionate about it, and that's what's
I
important.
am. um, just looking at it, if you have a man approach man, woman, whatever type of relationship you're in, if I say, hey, I want to talk to Miss Constance, and I go to you and I say, hey, I want to get to know you, you're going to look at me differently if I say, hey, I have a bachelor's, I have a master's and a doctoral degree, and whatever, and you're gonna say, oh, Chris got his stuff together. But if I come to you and say, hey, I'm homeless, you're gonna be like, I ain't trying to holler at no hobo or nothing like that. It's just a different mindset. And I want people to understand that it really does take a different mindset to move this society forward. And we really have to come together to make some of this stuff happen, because it's not one person, one organization. It takes all of us to help move this, not just community in Augusta, but society in general forward.
Yes, that's such a great point. It is. It's a collaborative effort. And with all of that you're doing, which is so crucial and so important, that brings me to professional wellness. How are you making sure that you are well as you're doing this, as you are truly confronting homelessness and providing all of these really great and needed resources? How are you making sure that you are maintaining your wellness? And or has there been a time where during your professional career, during the military, where you've noticed, wait a minute, I'm not really well, and this is what I need to do to get to this point of being well again?
Well, I'm gonna back this wagon train up, and let everybody, all the listeners, know that we have had a relationship over these past. It's been all over a decade, I believe. Um,
Mhm.
and I was actually one of your clients, because I realized that it was something that I needed to go through because I wasn't feeling 100%. And
Mhm.
I realized that during my tenure in the military, I went through some stuff, and it has had some uh other outcomes that has led to things that I can really say that it has perpetuated some stuff in the future. And what I mean by that is that I still have some of the remnants of what I've been through, and still trying to take care of it. And with
Mhm.
that being said, I now that I'm out of the military and have a career, well, doing the foundation and doing some other things, I realized that professional wellness and wellness in general is very important.
Yes.
um, my story is that, my father passed away in 2021 in November.
Sorry
My
to hear
uncle,
that.
I appreciate it. My uncle, his youngest brother, passed away 10 months after he did from cancer. Then his Irish twin, my other uncle, passed away June 9th. So it hasn't even been 2 years since my dad passed, and we've had a lot of losses. And so
Yes.
with that, I started looking at, and it made me reminisce on what we talked about in our counseling sessions back in the day. And it made me realize that I still have a lot that I still need to unhash, and I still need
Mhm.
to really go through. Um, it made me feel as if I'm not completely there.
Okay.
And I don't know if that makes sense, but when I say not completely there, that I'm here in physical form, but mentally and emotionally, I haven't been there. I've been in the other plane where I have been either depressed, sad, I've gone through anger, just so
Mhm.
much where I realized that I know I needed some help and I couldn't do this by myself. And it and I know this may, catch a lot of people off guard, and you may have a lot of listeners that are very religious, but I'm gonna go ahead and say this: religion is not the only way to get you through depression, anxiety,
Mhm.
all of this stuff. A lot of people had told me, "Oh, take it to Jesus," Woo. And I'm like, we have to be mindful of that. Don't get me wrong, I love the
Yes.
Lord, but I think that God put professionals here to help us with, mental wellness for a purpose, because we have a lot of individuals, not, I mean, just speaking on the military, that are going through so many emotions and cannot express them, because while we're in uniform, we've
Mm,
always had the notion of, you look weak if you go
okay.
to get help. You look like a softy if you go and say, "Oh, these are my emotions and my feelings." But what we fail to do and realize is that we're balling that up inside, and that eats at us bit by bit. And I realized that that's what was going on with me. I had a lot of emotions. I had a lot of uh thoughts that were in my head that I realized that were eating me up bit by bit, and a lot of trauma that I did not handle in my younger years that has went over to my adulthood. So, I don't look weak going to, mental health saying, "Hey, I need help," because I want to live my best life.
Yes, and that is so key. And I'm glad you brought all of that to the forefront regarding being a veteran and being in the military, when you're active duty, and some of the concerns and some of the bias that can be there regarding reaching out for support, and also religion and reaching out for support, and how important it is that you can utilize, if you're a person of faith, utilizing that, but also utilizing resources. I remember this was well over a decade ago. A well-known pastor, I was going to their church when I lived in the DC area, and they talked on us. This is a church that had 3 services back to back to back. And they mentioned being diagnosed with depression. And they said from the pulpit, it is okay to go see a therapist.
Mhm.
And that just was so meaningful to hear this person who had such a following, such an important presence, and to, from the pulpit as a pastor, to say, listen, I struggle with depression and I go see a therapist, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. And
Mhm.
I have a buddy. Since you brought that up, I have a buddy. She was working at the VA, and I'm gonna mention her name because she does a lot of work in Augusta area. Her name is Natalie Bryant, but she's a licensed clinical social worker. She does a lot of therapy sessions and whatnot.
Mhm.
And I was actually talking to her because I have some clients that go through some stuff, and I constantly talk to her. I said, well, how can I help my men in this situation? And recently, I just went through some stuff, and she said, Chris, she said, honestly, men, and especially black men, go undiagnosed with either bipolarism,
Mhm.
schizophrenia, or something, because we have that notion of, oh no, I'm macho, I'm tough, I
Mhm.
can handle it on my own, that we don't get diagnosed and get the proper help. And
Mhm.
sometimes I wonder myself, was I bipolar, because I had so many emotions swirling around me, but it
Mhm.
was just that I needed the help myself. But I realized that
Yes.
it is okay to go get help. And a lot of people, a lot of pastors, a lot of people in the leadership positions, we go through a lot, and we keep so much inside of us, and people don't really realize what we're going through. I tell a lot of people all the time that I don't know if people can handle the pressures of being a CEO, a president, or a leader of an organization, because of so many demands that are thrusted upon us. When you start looking at your family life, are you having a work-life balance? When you
Mhm.
start looking at, your playtime, are you able to have that time where you can do self-care, where you can say, hey, I'm gonna go get my manicure. I'm gonna go get my pedicure. I'm gonna go get my, my braids done just right. All of these things are just being able to talk to somebody about your issues. And a lot of times, what I realized for myself is that I didn't make the time. And it's so
Mhm.
crazy, because I always was taught that we could make time for the things we want to make time for. And I
Mhm.
had to realize and come upon this epiphany, shall I say, for myself, is that if something were to happen to me, it's only one of Christopher Mulliens.
Yes.
One. So you have to slow down, and it's okay to tell people no. Hey,
Mhm.
we have to reschedule this, or hey, I got to schedule this out, or no, I cannot do this because there's so many demands, even from family, friends, loved ones, the people who we help. It's so many things that are thrusted upon us that we have to say, hey, I cannot do this now. Give me an hour, give me a day, give me the weekend, and let me take care of me first. And some people, oh, no, they may
Mhm.
not understand, but a lot of people, when I tell them that, oh, Chris, go ahead and do your thing. I understand. I apologize. Just let me know when you're ready, because I think we've gotten to a point, luckily in society, where some people do care
Yes.
and they realize that hey, it's a lot that we have to deal with. And like I said, you're the only one. You're the only Constance Wallace. I'm the only
Yes.
Christopher Mulliens. We're the only ones. And if we die, you know, can can somebody else fulfill that mission you're supposed to be doing?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think about that
Exactly.
every time.
That's and you are listen, you are preaching a sermon today. You are preaching a sermon because it is so crucial that you set healthy and firm boundaries.
Boundaries.
That's it. Because when you are as an outgoing person, as someone who is, you see the vision, you have this great vision of this issue that needs to be addressed, but you also have life outside of that. You have, the loss of your father, the loss of uncle, the loss of another uncle. You have all of those things happening. And that is why I really wanted to focus on professional wellness, because we can get caught up and lost in what we're doing
Doing.
professionally, career wise, all of that, but not making sure that we are taking care of ourselves. And so
Hmm.
you have to give yourself that time, that space to, especially with grief. Um, I lost my mother a few months ago. I lost my
I'm sorry
father.
to hear that.
Thank you. I lost my father 6.5 years ago. And I realized after losing my father, and the way in which I did not maintain wellness overall, I learned from that to start practicing and implementing healthier strategies to practice wellness while also being a professional with the loss of my mother. It's so important because you're going to have those ebbs and flows. And it's important that you listen to yourself and you remind yourself it's one of me. Is one of
Right.
me, and it's okay for me to say no. It's okay for me to give myself the space and the grace to be okay.
Hey.
What have you found to be helpful outside, in addition to boundaries? What do you find to be helpful to kind of get you back on track when you feel like, wait a minute, my mental well being isn't where I want to be, my emotional wellness, all of that is not where I want it to be exactly? Well, first of all, what are the indicators for you where wait a minute, something's not okay? And what are the things that you're doing to address that wellness when it's not where it should be?
Ooh, nah, I'm not gonna get emotional when I talk about some of this stuff because it's, you know, s- el- and it's crazy that you say this. It's more ironic that you say this because we have been talking about in my therapy sessions, safe spaces.
Okay.
And my safe spaces are, music. Um, I do love the arts. Like I'm a person of the arts. When I was knee high to a grasshopper, as people like to say in the South, I was always doing something. I was always in music, marching band, doing something artistic. And I
Mhm.
always realized, even more so now, that's something that soothes me. Um, so what I do besides my therapy sessions, I go to the VA for therapy, and I do therapy, I do music therapy, and I do art therapy. And I
Good.
realized that those combined really give me a sense of, I don't want to say purpose, but it's like a calm. And it makes me
Mhm.
understand that, one, I think when I started looking at a lot of stuff, because I mean, I ran for board of education, the foundation, I was doing, I was the president of the library board here in Augusta. I mean, I was just doing so
Wow.
much. I was school bus driver. I was working on my master's after I got out the military. I received that. And I mean, I was doing all of these things. And I started realizing that my identity was being lost.
Mm.
And I had to find out who I was because the
Yes.
foundation is not just who I am.
Yes.
Being the former board president of the library system was not who I am. You know,
Mhm.
running for board of education was not who I am. Being a school bus driver was not who I am. Those are parts of me that I
Mhm.
realized that make me up, but it wasn't a part of me. And once I started
Yes.
realizing that and started realizing the emotional factors, because when I started talking to my therapist, she was like, one indicator that, and it's funny now that I'm thinking about it, she said, Chris, you know what you start doing? When you start to get emotional, you hit a subject and you go to something else.
Mm.
I
Mhm.
was like, and I thought about it, and she told me and I started indicating, and I saw indications of this when I talked about certain things. I never like mentioned my father's name. Some people that had passed on, my uncles or other people that I was speaking of, I never mentioned their names. But as I started going through the sessions, I guess because I started realizing, you know, these individuals aren't coming back, I was able
Mhm.
to clearly speak their names. And she was like, that's because you're letting your guard and your emotions come to a place where you're now meeting yourself where you are. You're starting to figure out who you are. Even it got to the point where everybody knows I'm the funny guy. I'm the person that, you know, people always say they feel my presence in the room,
Mhm.
whatever. But I started realizing that when I started going through, or when I do go through, I get a little reserved. I start
Okay.
backing up. I get quiet. I don't become the funny guy anymore. I become the guy like, yeah, leave me alone. Today's
Mhm.
not the day.
Mhm.
Yeah. Recently I was working somewhere. I'm not gonna call the company name. I was working somewhere and I got to the point where I was getting ready to fight one of my store manager because I was
Mhm.
one of the managers. And when that happened, I almost blacked out.
Okay.
And I realized, oh my gosh, I need to go seek help because
Mhm.
during that time frame, a friend of mine passed away, my dad passed, everything was happening like almost in succession, like back to back to
Yeah.
back to back. And I started again, like I said, I noticed I wasn't being the fun guy, the
Mhm.
friendly person. I was being a little crass. Um, I was also to the point where, hey, X, Y, and Z, I was being very short, you know, and it got also what I realized, some things that were said. Normally I can kind of brush stuff off or say how I feel, but I got to the point where it was really irritating me and I let a lot of that energy, that emotion build up that was being thrown at me.
Mhm.
And the last thing that the store manager said tipped the scale. And that's when I realized, hey,
Yeah.
you need to go get help. Because if I don't, I'm gonna be in
Mhm.
somebody's jail.
Mhm.
Or I'm gonna be, you
Yeah.
know, hugging myself, you know, because I knew that I was getting to that point. And I told
Mhm.
myself I never want to get to that emotional state again. Um, because that's not a great place to be. Not
Mhm.
a great place to be.
Yeah. And it's good that you were able to recognize it within yourself. You knew what those indicators were. Okay, once I experience this feeling and I want to respond in this way, this is it. And what's helpful for me is to go talk to someone, get that support, that clinical support, and art therapy, music therapy, talk therapy, helping me really get back to that point of that place of wellness and not just avoiding the hard things, but really addressing them. And I'm glad that you're just sharing all this because it's important as a Black man to talk about it. July is National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month.
Mhm.
So definitely glad that you're sharing this and the fact that you're a Black man who is getting help. You're getting therapy, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And you know, I totally agree. And I think that what we lost in society is the emotional intelligence aspect.
Mm-hmm.
We look at a lot, our children
Mm-hmm.
look at a lot, and we say, oh, you know, it's almost
Mm-hmm.
like playing a video game. Oh, if I die, I'll spawn back. Or if I get injured, all I have to do is
Mm-hmm.
take this elixir and it'll fix whatever's going on. And I think we've lost that emotional intelligence to the
Yes.
point where we ourselves we go through the motions and we don't recognize within ourselves how hurt we are until we hurt
Mhm.
other people. And I always tell a lot of my clients, hurt people hurt people.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I even that's speaking
Mhm.
to myself, being a hurt individual, I've hurt other people.
Mhm.
Not intentionally, but
Mhm.
because I was in that vulnerability state where I was just realizing I'm hurt. Let me
Yes.
hurt other folks, not knowing that I was hurt people because of things that I said or things that I did, or even just things that I didn't do. And that's,
Mhm.
because I at that time the emotional intelligence was
Mhm.
gone.
Mhm.
And I just wish that we would really sit down sometimes with ourselves and others and explain the real deal with what's going on, because I think that once we start really invoking emotional intelligence back into society, into relationships, into any type of ship, that
Yes.
we'll start realizing, hey, this person is not okay. I
Mhm.
even remember in the military, we used to have to carry our ACE cards. I thought I had it on me, but we used to have an ACE card, ask, care, escort. Hey, are
Okay.
you okay? C, Karen, hey, you good? Do you need anything? What can I do? E, escort. If I need to escort you somewhere, hey, where do you want to go? Hey, do I need to call somebody? Hey, do I need to call Miss Constance and say, hey, Miss Constance, I think we need an emergency therapy session because this
Mhm.
individual is on the brink of tipping over the scale. And I think again, we've just lost
Mhm.
that in society.
Yes, and this is as you were mentioning about what you were experiencing at this former job, when you are aware of when you have that emotional intelligence, that makes you a better professional. It makes you a better boss. It makes you a better business owner because
Mhm.
you are in tune with your emotions.
Right.
You are in tune to, okay, wait a minute, if I'm feeling this, and my intuition is to do this or to speak to someone in this manner, which is disrespectful, then, ooh, I need to pull it back in because I'm able to think it through and realize that's not how I need to show up as a professional and as a person.
And even I was asked at my former job to actually do some things that I wasn't in agreement with, and I'm like, that's not how you handle things. You know, as a former non-commissioned officer, it's always embedded in me to take care of your soldiers. If you take care of your
Mhm.
soldiers will take care of you. And I realize that wherever I go, whatever job position I hold, whatever leadership role, I always make sure I maintain that mindset of taking care of people, because you have to be able to pour in somebody. However, the caveat to that is you can't pour into somebody else when you're empty.
Yes, that is very true.
And so that is another thing about making sure that if you're empty, and it's been times where I have been empty, again, that goes back to saying, hey, that's too much for me right now. I cannot do this, because the
Hmm.
more you take on as an empty individual, you will collapse or implode.
Hmm.
And that will cause you to be disrespectful, to not care about others. And I'm the type of person that I'm always empathetic and apathetic and sympathetic to somebody's needs, to a certain degree, to make sure that, hey, if you're not okay, you're not going to be 100% at work if you're not 100% in
Hmm.
your home life.
Exactly.
And if I need to make sure I can get you even to 80, 90% home life is okay or whatnot, you could be okay 80, 90% at work.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. We could talk about this all day long. We have to do this again because you've brought up so many great points. And I definitely feel as though the Augusta community is in great hands with you, with your initiative, with your foundation, I mean, just the way in which you're seeing the big picture. It's not looking at someone and saying, oh, wow, and keep moving. You are actually doing something, and you're also taking care of yourself. And I mean, that is so important. And your grandmother, I'm glad. I am glad that she has you as a grandson because you are doing her proud.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So thank you so much for engaging in this very, very important and very, very needed conversation. Just really making sure that you are overall well, not being afraid to seek therapy, not being afraid to do different forms of therapy. Whereas, you know what, I'm going to engage in art therapy and just really being able to call yourself out. Because we
Right.
do live in a society where it's easy to call other people out, not as easy to call yourself out.
So,
And so you're calling yourself out and checking yourself when needed and making sure you get that support so that you can continue to serve the Augusta community in the way in which you know you need to.
I appreciate
Okay.
it. And the last thing I'm gonna say is that one thing, that technique that I learned too, that is very beneficial for me, is in music therapy. I was thinking we were gonna do, just listen to music or whatnot, but we actually, what was recommended to me by my therapist, and my music therapist, is to be able to write down how you feel. And when I
Mm-hmm.
tell you I have a green book thick full of stuff and I'm still writing stuff down, and we're turning that into music that I'm
Wow.
singing to, and being able to, put my thoughts, my innermost feelings and innermost emotions on paper to be able to put
Mm-hmm.
it to music. And I think that writing is essential for even letting some of your feelings come out. And so if people
Wow.
don't have the best communication skills, or being
Yes.
able to speak to somebody saying, hey, I feel this way, even if you write down how you feel, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to,
Mm-hmm.
we're not in English ENC 101 or 1101. Just writing down your emotions can really take a lot of the edge off
Yes,
of what's
music is
going on.
healing. Music can be so healing. And I'm glad that that is a part of your therapy, music therapy. Yeah, and before we go, how can individuals help your foundation? Where should they go and what can they do to help you during this initiative?
Well, with this initiative, we are trying to raise $25,000 to actually clear the land. If anybody wants to help, you can call me 904-749-8774 to get in contact with me, or my vice president, which her number is 706-945-6150. Or you can go on freddiemae.org, FREDDMAE foundation.org, and reach us there as well. Or you can hit me up on freddie.mae.foundation at gmail.com to reach me as well.
All right. Well, all of that will be listed for all the different ways that individuals can get in touch and they can help with the Freddie Mae Foundation. So thank you, thank you, thank you so very much for engaging in this conversation and everything you're doing for the community.
No, thank you. And if y'all need a therapist, Constance is the one, whichever way you are on the screen.
All right. Good seeing you.
Good seeing you too.
Goodbye.
Bye.